In the 365 days of a year, how many people in Australia lose their precious lives to workplace incidents? Take a guess while you look at these good, hard-working folks. Someone's husband, son, daughter, wife, brother or sister, someone's friend, someone who waited back home or at their local, someone you went to school with perhaps, someone like you and me. Well, I hope that the figure that you guessed was a lot higher than 200, because that perhaps will make the only silver lining to this otherwise confronting concern. Safe Work Australia publishes a report on this subject matter each fiscal year, but before we take a deeper dive into it, let's count 3 provisions. First, that this number is not indicative of suicide, which at least in part could be driven by workplace stress and other mental health related complexities. The second is something called Heinrich principle. It is a data tool but still relevant, be it in different iterations of it. Here we have one example showing that to every one fatality there are 10 major incidents. The formula then continues. This implies that to our 200 fatalities last year, there would have been 2,000 major incidents, most of which, if not all, would have resulted in long-term injuries, physical and mental, and substantive financial losses, putting businesses under existential threat. And the third is the fact that fatalities are generally computed in on account of per 100,000. This factors in several variables such as workforce in certain industry or jurisdiction, population growth and other such concerns, some of which you'll also see in this report. Now, if your earlier estimation were less than 200, don't despair, because at least this figure is at the very least twice as much better than what it could have been. Here, for example, we see that in 2007, more than 300 people losing their lives in that one year alone, which amounted to 3 fatalities per 100,000 workers. This rate has since dropped significantly to 1.4, less than half actually, implying on ground of Heinrich principle that all incidents, at least the major ones, have gone less than half in the last 20 odd years. In fact, even when compared to 2013, it's almost 20% drop, one less per 5 fatalities or major incidents. The report also offers fascinating facts to which I would love to read your insights. Here, for example, we learn that while the national average is 1.4, among men it's 2.6, which is significantly higher than women, which in comparison at least is a mere 0.1. Okay, the age bracket distribution of the workplace fatalities is by far the most curious detail you will find in these reports. The convention will have you believe that younger people have a higher propensity to take on risk-taking behavior. However, what we find in these reports year after year after year is that the phenomenon, at least in Australia, is the exact opposite. Young people in Australia are least likely to be involved in risk-taking behavior. The figures speak for themselves. With the national average of 1.4, among under 25 it is 1.2. Between 25 and 34 it is 0.9. Between 35 and 44 it is 1.1. Between 45 and 54 it is 1.4, and then the plot thickens. Between 55 and 64 it is 1.9, nearly 2, with the highest number of fatalities in an age bracket. And 65 and over it's 3.9, nearly 4 fatalities per 100,000 workers in this age bracket. And here we have the stats according to gender and age last year, and the year before, and the year before that. Now, do you remember the national average? Now compare it to the figures from each state and territory. Western Australia, 1.7 this year compared to 1.4 last year and 2.1 the year before that. South Australia, 1.8. The last year figure was 1.8 and the year before it was 1.3. Victoria is sitting at 1.0. Last year too it was 1.0 and the year before it was 1.5. Tassie is sitting at 0.7 this year. Last 2 figures were 1.9 and 3.2. Poor consistency itself is an indicator. New South Wales this year is sitting at 1.4. Last year it was 1.1 and the year before it was 1.3. Canberra this year was 0.4, the same as it was last year, and the year before it was 0.8. Queensland this year is 1.8 and the last 2 years were 1.6 and 1.4. And the Northern Territory? Well, this year this was 3.6, with 3.1, 4.6 the previous 2 years. Outside the Capital Territory, which is a much smaller and niche concern, Victoria statistically is the safest state and has been for a while. Of the total toll of 200 people who lost their lives, 42% of them, which is to say 84 people, died in what was vehicle-related incident. And these are not necessarily incidents on roads. Road toll is included if the incident somehow was work-related. 30 people fell from height to their deaths. On top of which are 1,200 incidents, major incidents, where objects fell from height causing crush injuries. 12 of them were fatalities. do please remember to mention this to someone you know who work at height, not to underestimate the risks involved, only because they could have been doing it for a long time and nothing ever happened to them. Another 24 people died being struck by moving objects, 10 fatalities were due to electrocution, and the list continues. Here there was one detail you will not see in any of the previous year's reports: the death of 8 people due to being assaulted at workplace by a person or persons. Such tricky times we're living in. Now, the Australian national average of 1.4 fatalities per 100,000 workers is largely driven by the monumental 8.3 deaths per 100,000 among the plant operators. Now, if you're in charge at a workplace, you won't have unlimited resources. Nobody does. At least now you know where you're running the most risk, requiring your best efforts for risk mitigation. Among the labourers, which is to say unskilled workforce, the rate is 4.4, and among the tradies, the rate drops down to 1.4. And here we have the rest of the breakdown. And which industry would you say is statistically the most hazardous? What would make the top 3 on your list? What I can report to you, having tracked these numbers for now more than a decade, is that the first 2 positions on this rather notorious podium are permanently taken. The first is, and has been for a while, agriculture, forestry and fishing, and the second is transport, postal and warehousing. The third position sort of changes each year, but generally it's a tug between construction and mining, though other sectors do moonlight on the third position from time to time. And here we have the list of other sectors. Can you spot your industry? In some cases, it could be a combination of multiple sectors. And here we have the figures from last year, the year before, and the year before that. The graph here maps the Australian statistics to comparable Commonwealth countries, the UK and New Zealand. Which of these 3 countries, in your opinion, has performed the best since the beginning of the century? Here's my take. You have to hand it to the Kiwis to drop their rate from the dizzying height of 8.5, that's nearly 9 per 100,000 workers, losing their lives to workplace incidents back in 2006, to a much improved 2.0 now, and also following an overall positive trend. Still, there's a lot needed doing. And to the Brits, good job keeping it under 1.0 per 100,000 and even dipping down under 0.5, and rather crucially, keeping it consistent as well. Consistency is a critical key performance indicator. And yes, the Aussies. I wish the trend we picked up in 2007 that lasted till 2014 lasted longer. By now we would have actually dipped under 1.0. However, it leveled off, and apart from a particularly good year in 2018, the consistency is also visible. Canada is another comparable Commonwealth not shown here. Their numbers make a rather unfortunate read, higher than anything you see on this graph, with an average of nearly 5 fatalities per 100,000 workers, and in some of their jurisdiction as high as 8 or more. My pick of the countries shown on this graph? No, wait, I have changed my mind. I think it's the Aussies. Yeah, it's definitely Australians. Yeah, there are many reasons for that, and here's one.
So here, Ducks, the ball is still active, goes walking down the wicket, and is run out. Smart work.
That continued as the players went through the long room.
You've tarnished it, you've tarnished your good name, you've tarnished cricket.
That's not how Australia would feel happy winning an Ashes game, is it?
Well, kind of, yes. I mean, that's out. The other reasons, of course, are factors that potentially affect these figures, such as, for example, the types of industries involved, environmental conditions, geography, especially geography, and other related factors. Mind you, they would have affected the Canadian numbers too. Anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to join us by subscribing. Until next time, be safe and keep everyone safe as well.